Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next lesson here. We're going to be talking about the types of data that we can run into when we do research. Okay, so whenever we conduct a study or we get ready to do stats, we typically collect data. Like if we wanted to know what's a typical height of a person, or what's a normal weight for a certain age group, or something like that. We tend to conduct a study and we collect data, and there are different types of data that we need to know about. All right, so when we look up here at our goals, we want to understand and identify what qualitative data is, and we also want to understand and identify what quantitative data is. So notice the difference there. We've got qual and quant, right? So we're going to talk about the difference between those two words. And then we're going to also understand and identify the difference between discrete and continuous data. Okay, so we're going to take a look at those. All right, so like I said, data comes from a population or from a sample. We use letters like X and Y usually to represent our data values, right? So most data can be put into the following categories. We have qualitative and quantitative, and we're gonna go ahead and give an informal definition for these types of data. So when we're talking about qualitative data, this is usually referred to as categorical. Okay. So categorical in nature, and it's usually data that's indicated by a label, right? So it's in value indicated by a label. All right. So examples of qualitative data would be things like it's non-numerical type of data, right? So examples of this might be like hair color, right, is a good example. So like if you were collecting data on the hair color of people, hair color is qualitative. It's a non-numeric value. Race, right? If you were to collect data on what race people are, that is not a numerical value. It's a label. It's a categorical value. We're talking about things like eye color could be another one. Okay, favorite food. If we were trying to find out what is the favorite food of people, right? So favorite food is another label type thing or a categorical type of data. All right. So let's compare that to something like quantitative data. Quantitative data is numerical, right? So I always think of that this is the stuff where we end up with numbers when we collect the data. So it's a value indicated by a number. Okay, so examples of this might be like height, weight, time. All right, you could do something like number of pets, right, or the number of cars that people own, right? These are all good examples of quantitative data. Okay. So then quantitative data can be further divided into two more categories called discrete and continuous, right? So when we talk about discrete data, I like to just kind of put some bullet points here with how we identify it. So discrete data is something that is countable, right? And it results from counting something. Okay, so for instance, you might count the number of pets, or you might count the number of cars that someone has. All right, so there's no fractions, no decimals, there's no irrational numbers. Okay, so it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like that. We're talking like nice counting numbers. Typically is typically how we identify what we would call quantitative discrete data. It's numerical and it's countable. So examples of something like this, like again, might be the number of pets, but like let's think about sports like home runs, right? So the number of home runs that somebody hits is discrete. And the reason being is because if you would count the number of home runs that somebody hits, right? They can hit 10 home runs, they can hit 11 home runs, but they can't hit 10.5 home runs, right? There's nothing in between the 10 and the 11 that exists, right? So there's these gaps in the data in between 10 and 11, and that's because we're counting by a particular interval. And that is what makes it discrete. So another example of quantitative discrete data might be like the number of students in a stats class. Okay. So then let's compare that to quantitative continuous data. Quantitative continuous data is almost the opposite of this in that it's not countable. It's not something you can count. Instead, it's something that you measure. Okay, so it results from measuring something. All right, so and for this one, you can have fractions and decimals. All right, so examples of this might be, like some of the things I mentioned up here: height, weight. Right, we measure height, we measure weight. Right, so you can have something like if you measure the weight of an object, it could be 100 pounds, it could be 100.1 pounds, 0.2 pounds, 0.3 pounds, 0.35 pounds. Right, so there's an infinite number of values that weight can take on in any given interval. All right, so we got height, weight, time is another one. Speed is something that is continuous, right? If you were measuring the speed of something, the volume of something, these are things that we would consider to be quantitative continuous data. All right, so let's look at some examples of data that we might run across, and let's determine what type of data it is. All right. So the data, it tells us right here, it's going to describe the data, and then we're going to determine whether or not it's quantitative or qualitative, and then if it's quantitative, we're going to distinguish it between discrete and continuous. All right, so it tells us here the data are the number of books students carry in their backpacks. So you sample 5 students, and you find that 2 of them are carrying 3 books, 1 is carrying 4, 1 of the students is carrying 2 books, and 1 of the students is carrying 1 book. All right, so the data is right over here, right? The number of books that the students are carrying. So that is definitely numerical, right? So I know right away this is quantitative. This is quantitative data. The question is whether or not it is discrete or continuous. And the way I always ask myself is, well, if I have 1 book, I can have 2 books. Could I have 1.5 books? That really wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. How do you define half of a book? You really can't, right? It's either a book or it's not. So this is quantitative discrete, right? There's nothing in between 1 and 2 with this type of data. There's nothing in between 2 and 3, right? So there's not an infinite number of values in between any given interval, therefore it's discrete. All right, so let's look at another one. The data are the number of machines in a gym. You sample 5 gyms. So in one gym, you find 12 machines. In the next gym, you find 15, then 10, then 22, then 20. So it looks like it's numerical because I'm seeing numbers, right? So that's a dead giveaway that it's quantitative. Quantitative. And so if we're counting machines, so it looks like we're counting things again, right? So that sounds like it's discrete. I can have 12 machines, I can have 13 machines, but I can't really have 12.5 machines or 12.4 machines. So this is going to be discrete as well. So I'm going to say quantitative discrete. All right, so let's try this next one, right? So we got the data are the weights of backpacks with books in them. You sample the same 5 students as in the first question, right? So that other question that we were looking at with the backpacks, it's the same 5 students, but after we got done counting their books, we also got a scale out and measured the weight of their backpacks, right? And notice that the backpacks carrying 3 books can have different weights, right? So it's because they have different books in the backpacks, right? So there were 2 students that had 3 books and they have different weights. That's okay. But let's take a look at our data here. We got 6.2. So the first backpack that we weighed was 6.2 pounds, then 7 pounds, 6.8 pounds, 9 pounds, 9.1 pounds, and 4.3 pounds. So again, these are numbers. So this is going to be quantitative. This is quantitative. And since we're measuring and these are weights, this is going to be continuous. This is a quantitative continuous type of data because I could have 7 pounds, I could have 7.1, 7.2, 7.21, 7.2001, right? There's an infinite number of values in between any given interval there. So that is continuous data. Let's see what we got. We got the data are the areas of lawns in square feet, right? So we go to 5 houses and we measure the areas of the lawns and we get 144 square feet, 160, 190, 180, 210. So what type of data is this? Again, I see numbers. Okay, so this is quantitative. It's quantitative data. And the question is whether or not it is continuous or discrete. Now, the data that we're given, these are nice, clean integer numbers, but there would be nothing stopping us from having 144.1 square feet, 0.2, depending on like if we had an oddly shaped lawn or something like that. Area is definitely something that you have to obtain by measuring dimensions. All right, so you would probably go, if it was a rectangular lawn, you would measure length and width, and you would multiply those to get the area. So there is a measurement that is occurring there. So this is going to be a continuous type of data. Okay. All right, let's do this next one here. So we got the data are the colors of backpacks. So it says, again, you sample the same 5 students as before. So I got to look at this table carefully. So I sampled 5 students, and one of them had a red backpack. There were 2 black backpacks, 1 green and 1 gray. And so remember, the data are the colors. Right, so we're looking at this over here. We're not really looking at the numbers over here. We're looking at the colors. Right, the data is the actual colors. So colors are not numerical. So this is going to be qualitative. So make sure you pay attention to the wording of the question very carefully. This is tricky because they gave you a table with colors and numbers, and you might have been tricked into thinking this is quantitative because they gave you numbers, but the data that we actually care about were the colors according to the question. All right, so this is qualitative data, and there's no need to distinguish between continuous or discrete when it's qualitative. All right, so here we go. The data are the colors. We got colors again of houses, so we sample 5 houses, and the colors are white, yellow, red, or white, yellow, white, red, and white. Okay, so again, these are non-numerical values, so this is qualitative. All right, so that's it for today. That's all we're going to talk about, just the distinction between quantitative, qualitative, discrete, continuous. We're going to do a quick activity today that you'll get to kind of talk with your classmates and debate over some different types of data. So hopefully that's a fun thing for you to do. Otherwise, have a great day, and we'll see you back in the Zoom chat.